Welcome to Jay's Sports. I'm your host, Show Trap. Detroit Lions News Podcast. Obviously, I didn't do a post game podcast today, so I wanted to do a YouTube video for the people. My reaction to the Detroit Lions game was simple. It's what the overlay says. It was a gritty win. And when you think about a gritty win and you talk about the Detroit Lions, you see it posted on billboards, grit. You see it on t shirts, grit. You see it on uh, shirts, hats, anything. You see grit all over the place. And you think about it and you go, it's a marketing term. It's okay. A lot of teams don't live by their marketing terms. I think the only one that really did was do your job by the Patriots. But a lot of people, they don't live by their marketing terms. It's a thing that they market grit, right? So today I go on the One Pride Nation group. I look at what people are saying, and people are calling it an ugly win. They're calling it a disgusting win. Uh, Basically a bad win, which there's no bad win in football. In the NFL, there's no bad win. On any given week, any given day, you could lose to the worst teams. That's just the reality. But I got to thinking, when you watch the Detroit Lions play today, there were some things that they did wrong. Obviously, they weren't perfect. Missed a field goal. They were pretty. They weren't great in the red zone in terms of getting touchdowns. Dan Campbell alluded it in his questionnaire with TJ Lang on 97 the ticket. And when you think about the Detroit Lions and you think about what are they good at? Well, the Detroit Lions are usually good at scoring. They're usually good at just, dominating teams. Obviously, with the number one average margin of victory, they're killing teams. And their point differential coming in today was 144, which is amazing. And you think about what happened with the Detroit Lions today in the second half. It was a very interesting day for the Detroit Lions. These were all the injuries. At one point, Mosley, he got something happened in pregame warmups. He was inactive, so he got ruled out. Arnold didn't start because DC wanted to make sure he was good. Should be just fine, says Jeremy Leo of the Detroit Lions podcast. Josh Pascal, knee hard step, possible bone bruise, hope no cartilage damage, MRI pending. Franz Enrique, it was a knee slight various possible LCL patella tendon, MRI pending, might miss some time. Wingo, nothing on video, possible mild right knee injury, sprain in the third quarter, wore brace the rest of the game. He was banged up. DJ Reader, shoulder concern for a sub-Lex Hope, which is just a mild strain, stayed in. Skipper had an injury to his torso. Dorsey had a low ankle sprain. Rodriguez knee buckled, concern for non-contact ACL injury. Hope was just a mild sprain. Zadarius Smith had likely cramps at end of game. Branch left ankle pain, end of game, no video. So if you go down the line, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11 people during this game and before the game got injured. And a lot of people talk about the Detroit Lions and they talk about grit. And I think the most successful people in life, whether it's a business person, a politician, a sports figure, a sports team, I think the thing that separates the elite from the good is the way they handle adversity. And the Detroit Lions could have just said, it's not our day. We're having a bunch of injuries. We could just quit. Because if you watch Detroit Lions in years before, a team like Jim Caldwell would have quit. Patricia's would have quit. Jim Schwartz would have quit. But this team didn't. You had at one point when Zadarius Smith was going in and out of the game because he had cramps. El Quadin Muhammad comes in, has a PBU, he has a sack, he has a pressure. Crucial person in that game. Then Zadarius is coming in and out of the game with the cramps, and he comes and gets a sack. Grit is not something that is just a marketing term for the Detroit Lions. It's the way they play. And today was a perfect example, but we have 3 examples of it's a consistent pattern with the Detroit Lions this year and throughout the Dan Campbell era. They don't let the small things really affect them. Like, they don't let it happen. Here's a quote from Dan Campbell. I want you to hear this quote. This is from Nolan Bianchi of the Detroit News. He said Dan Campbell asked if he feels snake bitten with all the Lions' defensive injuries. Dan Campbell responds with, "Does it really matter? Who cares? Worrying about it and moaning about it and bitching about it. What does it matter? Whoever we have available, we expect them to hold the line." So when you think about what Dan Campbell's saying right there, you think about it. What's Dan Campbell saying there? He's saying we don't, with injuries, we don't care. It's just next man up. And today proved the next man up. But it didn't just prove the next man up theory. It proved the Detroit Lions organization that what their term that they have around the billboards, the t-shirts, the hats, the grit symbol is totally true. Think about it like this. You go against a guy in business and sports and media and politics, whatever you do, it's very tough to beat a person that doesn't quit, that always fights. And you're just like, dude, come on. You threw 5 interceptions in this game today in Houston. Just quit. You fell down 10-0 to the Vikings. Just quit. Most teams would quit. You know, you had 12 injuries today, 11 injuries today. Just quit. It's very easy to say that. It's very easy to use that as an excuse. And a lot of people in life, they do use things like that as an excuse. But I thought what Dan Campbell and this team proved is that they do have a championship DNA. You know, I got the chance to talk to a person who was a former Michigan Olympian. And he said, what separates the best from good is just mindset. How do you handle adversity? Do the little things affect you? Do you find joy in times of grief? Thought about it. That's a very good way to put it. Like, it's easy to be confident and be bomboious, be excited when everything is going good. It's another thing to have pride. It's another thing to have grit. It's another thing to battle adversity. And we've seen Detroit fight adversity 3 times this year. You see them fall behind to the Texans with 5 interceptions. They were down pretty big at halftime. They fell down 10-0 to the Vikings, a team that was undefeated at the time, and they come back to win. You see today a bunch of injuries. You hold steady. You win the game. It shows you. You know, the grit term that the Detroit Lions use, the organization that uses grit term, it's not just a billboard, a marketing ploy. It's the way they roll. You know, going back to what that Michigan Olympian said, it really leads me to what we thought about the Detroit Lions. You know, Dan Campbell, the players believe in him. But the players don't believe in him to a point where they go, oh, yeah, when they get on the field, they act completely different. No, they believe in everything this guy says. And when you look at great leaders in history, you look at great leaders in history, in war, in politics, in sports, you always see that the great leaders always have a stranglehold on their locker room. And usually their locker room and the way that they play, especially in sports, shows up on the court, the field, the ice, wherever they play. See, when Dan Campbell came in and said, we'll take a hunk out of your knee, we'll bite a kneecap off, a lot of people laughed at it. But you got to look back at it and say, that is the way they play. Think about it. They fought like hell today to win this game. A guy who no one knew at one point, Al-Quadin Muhammad, made huge plays today. And they just kept fighting. And they gave Chicago a run for their money, and Chicago gave them a run for their money. But in the end, they came out victorious. In the end, the better team, the team that had the most mental strength, the most emotional strength, won the football game. You look at the good teams across the league in the NFL, they all have one thing in common. emotional strength. They don't get too down, they don't get too high, they just keep fighting. They keep fighting, they keep fighting. The greatest players in sports keep fighting. If you watch Kobe or MJ or you watched, name player throughout history, they had some down moments, but then they had some up moments, and it never really changed their game. The Detroit Lions didn't change their game because they were getting a bunch of injuries. They didn't change their game. They kept fighting, and yes, it got a little bit hairy at the end. Yes, it was a little too close for comfort. But the reality of the situation is this: a lot of teams would have faltered. A lot of teams would have fell by the wayside with all the injuries that they had. Not this team. Not this group, not this coach, not this organization. It's not the way they run. They don't believe in excuses. They don't believe in blaming a certain portion. They believe even if you listen to the video of the locker room celebration, he was talking about grading wins, and he said it's hard to win in the NFL. Like a perfect message for the game that they had today. Dan Campbell is just a great head coach. He's a great leader of men. In a world where there's not many great leaders of men anymore, it's about schematics and all that stuff. Dan Campbell has proven with this Detroit Lions team that you can be a great leader of men and lead a great team. And today was a perfect example of that because things didn't go your way in the second half and you just fought and you kept fighting and you didn't let the Bears get to, you didn't let the Bears get to you. You just kept fighting to the end, fighting to the end. And then you get to the end and you win. And yes, the Bears are a bunch of morons for not calling timeout. No doubt about it. But the reality of the situation is this. When you look back at this game, it'll be a win in the column. You got 11, you're 11-1 right now. You have 2 more home games, and if you win those, you're probably going to be in the number 1 overall seed. At the end of the year, you'll look back at this game, and it'll be a perfect identifier of what the Detroit Lions have become. They've no longer became the team where they're going to just fall by the wayside. They're no longer the team that's going to fall because they're going to make all the mistakes. This game showed you today that the guy who is leading the charge, Dan Campbell, is the perfect person to lead this organization. And the thing that's on the billboards and the shirts and the hats, the grit, that's not just a marketing ploy. It's an identity. And I think it's very, very interesting when people look back at this game. They'll think about it. Wow, that was fantastic. So the Detroit Lions win 23-20. And yes, it wasn't the best to win. But I want you to look back at this game after the season and ask yourself, was it a win or was it a loss? It's a win. A win's a win in the NFL. There are no style points. You've had all the style points you want, but the one thing that's been clear in this 10-game winning streak, you fell behind by 10, you came back to win. You threw 5 interceptions, you come back to win. You don't play the most perfect second half, you hold steady and you win the game. The Detroit Lions are no longer a team that's going to fall apart. They're a team that's going to grow in times of adversity. And I think if you're going to take anything out of this game today, that's what you should take out of this game today. So we'll see you in the next video as we talk more Detroit Lions football on JC Sports. We will be talking all of Detroit sports on JC Sports. So please follow me below. Subscribe, rate, review, comment below what you think about this. And even though it wasn't the prettiest win, it was a good win for the Detroit Lions. It's a great win for this franchise. We'll see you in the next podcast. We talk more Detroit Lions football here on JC Sports.